again, and welcome to my kitchen. I am Rachel Simonson. I serve as the gift planner for the St. John's Foundation in Billings, Montana, and I'm happy to have you with me today. In one of the last sessions, we talked about breaking down whole chickens, and while we were doing that, I kept taking parts away and putting them off to the side, telling you not to throw them away. And here is the result of all that. It's a plate full of chicken parts. What I like to do with this is to make chicken stock out of it. And we've got a lot of pieces here. We've got some wings. I cut up 2 chickens, so I should have 4 wings on this plate. I've got 2 backs and then some of the little drumettes. And just when I took the breast apart, I saved the rib pieces to use in the stock pot. What having the bones is going to do for us is to let all of the collagen just come right out of these bones, and it makes a really nice, thick, hearty chicken stock, and we will show you that at the very end here. But to get started, I like to make sure that my chicken pieces, my remnant pieces, are good and brown before I ever put any water on them. Some recipes you'll see just to put these pieces in a pot, cover them with water, and let them simmer for 6, maybe even 8 hours. That's a lot of time. And I like to just take some shortcuts when I can. And so I'm going to do these in the oven first. So I've got a big stock pot here, a Dutch oven. And the reason I'm using such a large one is because I do want most of these pieces to touch the bottom of the pan. So I'm going to layer them in, and I want skin side down as much as I possibly can. So I'm going to take the bone, the backbone piece, and just lay it on either side of my pan. And then the other pieces with good skin. I want that to come in contact with the bottom of the pan. You saw the inside of my pan and how brown it is. You know, on the cooking shows, they always have perfect pans that they start with. But when you have good contact with the surface, it browns your food. And that browning makes the stock really hearty. So I'm going to lay these wing pieces down and get them as much surface contact as I can. So you can see, chickeny fingers don't like that. You can see that I've got a nice layer of skin covering the bottom of my pan. That's also going to create some of its own fat. I don't need to add any oil, olive oil or anything, because the skin will release all the fats that are underneath the skin. It's called rendering. And that will add some lovely flavor to our stock as well. I'm going to stop at this point because now I'm going to start layering it up, and I want to season each layer. So I'm just going to grab a little kosher salt. Again, use more than you think you ought to. That's probably 1/4 teaspoon that I just put in there in 2 little pinches. And then just throw in some pepper. All right, and then I'm going to build the second layer with my remaining rib pieces. And this is the one neck that came out of the chicken. I have 2 chickens with 1 neck. I'm sure somebody got one chicken with 2 necks. That's just how it happens these days in the chicken processing plants. And here's a little drumette that I managed to salvage off of one of the breasts as well. All right, I'll season that second layer, and I'll give you a peek. Again, probably not quite 1/4 teaspoon this time. There's not as much chicken. All right, this is going in the oven. Doesn't look like much now, but in about 45 minutes, it'll be nice and brown. I've got a hot oven at 425, and we'll put it in, and we'll come back in about 45 minutes to an hour, and I'll show you the next step. All right, I'm back. It has been 45 minutes. I said 45 minutes for the chicken parts to go into the oven and get good and roasted, and they are in fact good and roasted. Let me get them and I'll show them to you. All right, I've got a heat-safe board down on my countertop, and got a good hot pan here. And I'm going to show you what's happened. My chicken pieces are good and brown. And I don't know if you can see this or not, but there's all this fat that has come out of that. That's the rendering of the chicken. And I'm actually going to leave that fat in the pan as we build our next step for the chicken stock. And there's a reason I'm going to do that. The reason I'm going to do that is because fat is flavor. When the chicken stock is all done and it's cooled, the fat is going to come to the top and it will just sit and solidify on top of whatever container I put the chicken stock in. Then I can lift the fat off and either throw it away or use it. I'll show that to you at the very end of this as well. But don't throw that fat away yet. Don't worry about it. It's going to be okay. So into our pan, I am going to put a few aromatics. I just need to get this out of the way so I can cut on my board. All right. We need something to flavor the stock. Now you keep hearing me talk about chicken stock. There's a big difference between chicken stock and chicken broth. You can get both in the stores. They come in a container, a little quart box. A stock is very light, it's very thin, doesn't have much color, doesn't have much flavor. A stock, on the other hand, has more depth of flavor and it also has a rich color to it. And that just comes from the roasting of the bones. It comes from the addition of some aromatic vegetables that'll go in there. So what I'm going to add to our pan before I put any water in it is just really remnants from my vegetable drawer in the refrigerator. I have kind of a sad carrot here. It's been in there for about 2 weeks. And so it's getting a little floppy, but there's nothing wrong with it. So I'm going to put that in the stock pot. I'll give it a quick rinse. I'm not going to peel it. I will rinse it because you never know what's on your produce these days. Also, I have 2 ribs of celery. Now, I had a package of celery ribs in the refrigerator because I couldn't find a whole stalk of celery. I would normally not use ribs for this chicken stock. It's wasteful. This is the good eating part. What I would normally use for the stock pot is the tips with all the leafy stuff, and I would use the root end. I would just hack off that full root end, wash it up good, and throw that in the pot. That white celery that is sort of stringy and pithy, nobody wants to eat that. Goes great in the stock pot. What I also have here is an onion, and this happens to be a sweet onion. I love the sweet onion to buy that, mainly because it's not quite as strong, and I can remember the number when I go to the self-checkout. It's 4166. So in case you are a numbers person like I am, that's what this one is. I am not going to use the whole onion. What I am actually going to do is use the skin and the top end, and because this one actually looks pretty clean, I'm going to use the root end as well. Whatever I would cut off and throw away before I actually dice the onion or slice it or whatever I'm going to do, that's what's going in my pot. That's where the flavor is. All right, so let me get after that. I just cut the root end off. Turn this so you can see what I'm up to here. Sorry about that. If it makes you dizzy, I am sorry about that. All right, and then I'm going to cut this root end off. This one's got quite the stem end, and it's kind of dry looking, and I don't trust that there isn't dirt in there. So I'm just going to snip that off, and we'll throw that away. But I do want that top end of my onion. Okay, so off it comes. Hack it off, throw it in the pan. Then I'm just going to cut my onion in half just to make this easier, and I'm going to take that first layer off that I would normally just throw away, because you never know if it's fully usable. And even the skins, in they go. Peel this one off. Yep, see how that's just really not usable at all. It's like, it's leathery skin. I'm gonna throw that in. And because I like an even onion to go back in the fridge, I'm just gonna pull that broken second layer off too. Okay, so that's that. Wash up my carrots. Now the stem end here, I also think they look a little bit suspect. There might be a little bit of dirt in there, so I'm just gonna cut that off and throw it in. And then the tip, because it's getting floppy, is a little brown. Just get rid of that as well. And I'm not even going to cut this. I'm just gonna snap them and throw them in. Same with the celery. Just so it fits in the pan, snap it and throw it in. Last thing I'm going to add to our stock pot is a bay leaf. If you've had these in your pantry for years, they're probably still okay. You know, spices and what have you do kind of go stale after a while. But making stock during these times when we're trying to not go to the grocery store quite so often, and we're trying to stretch our product and our dollars as best we can, the bay leaf will add really nice flavor. So pull them out and start using them and see what you think of them. Anyway, we only need one, so I'm going to throw that in the pot as well. All right, my pot is still hot because it came right out of the oven, so I'm just going to stretch it across over there. And now I'm just going to fill it up with water. Okay, you can see that I took it almost all the way up to the top, and I did that because a lot of that moisture, that water, is going to evaporate in the form of steam, and so I wanted to get it as full as I possibly could. I can do one of two things with this now. If I want to watch it on the stove, I'll just put the lid on and set it on my burner and just bring it up to a boil, light boil, not a heavy boil. And then I'll just cut it back to a bare simmer. Or I could just put it back in the oven. Whatever suits your fancy. If you like to monitor things on your stove, it's kind of fun to watch it and smell it come together. If you're kind of a set it and forget it sort of person, just put it in the oven, walk away. 2-3 hours is really all this is going to take. If it goes 4, that's fine too. So it's a lot faster than just taking a whole chicken and putting it in a pot with some cold water and hoping for the best to get chicken broth. All right, so I'm going to take this and put it on my stove, get going on it, and when it's done, I will come back and I'll show you what we're gonna do. We'll end up discarding all of the solid pieces in there, and we'll put it into a container and let it chill. Thanks. We'll see you soon. All right, here I am back again, and it's been 2 full hours since I put the chicken stock on the stove. It's been just simmering away, and you might have some questions about how do you know when it's ready to pull off? Because I said 3 to 4 hours, and you just never know. It might take 3, it might take 4. Let's take a peek here and see what we have. We have a nice bubble still. All right. Let's take a look here. My bones are really starting to fall apart. That's probably one of my first visual clues that this is coming apart. Here's that neck we were talking about. The skin just falls away, and the neck itself is really brittle. It's just falling apart. That tells me that whatever is inside those bones that's working its magic is finding its way into the stock, the broth. And what that means is at the end of the cooking process, after this all cools down, the broth, the stock, will actually have a bit of a jello consistency. Not full on set jello, but jello that's just beginning to set. It'll have a little wobble to it. And that's exactly what we're looking for. That's that collagen coming out of these bones, just giving way. You can see that everything's just really falling apart, fork tender. That's a really good sign. Also, the vegetables, they still have some toothiness to them. They're not totally falling apart. I think I'll wait just another half hour or an hour or so to call this good. But we're just about there right now. So I'll be back and show you what the end product looks like. This is what that that pot is looking like that I just demonstrated. All right, we are on the home stretch for our chicken stock, and I just want to show you a couple of things. This happens to be the chicken stock that I usually buy, and this is what it looks like in the jar from a color perspective. This is what I just ladled out of the pot. It's still steaming. I don't know if you can see it, but I can see the steam rising. They are nearly identical in color. And so this is what stock looks like. It's a little cloudy and very deep and rich in color. Now, just after this had gotten started, 2-3 hours ago, I pulled some of the initial stock from this so that I could show you what I was talking about with that fat. I've had this sitting in the fridge for 2.5 hours, and you can see the ring up here is the fat that is starting to congeal. And I don't know if you can see this or not, but how the stock itself, even after only being cooked for about an hour, right now it is of a very loose gelatin consistency. So even after an hour, we had that collagen coming out of the bones. So this is going to be a successful stock. Let me show you how I go about making everything come together here. This is the hardest part, getting the spent bones and vegetables out of the stock itself without making too much of a mess. So I've got a very large bowl, and my strainer happens to fit right inside this bowl. And I'm going to place this in my sink. And I'm going to go over to the stove and grab our pot, and I'll bring it over here to my board so you can watch me get the stock out of the pot. Again, I have a heat-safe board. Just, you would not want to put this pan on your countertop. That would not be good for it. So, we have stock. You can see that the vegetables are, they've given absolutely everything that they've got to give. They are done. And the reason I have the bowl inside, or the strainer inside, is because some juice is going to come out of these vegetables, and I don't want to lose that precious stock, the liquid. I want to make sure to capture that. But I'm not going to save any of this stuff that's on those chicken parts. If I can find one of those wings still intact, I'm going to show you. Yeah, here's a wing. If you remember, that one fell apart. It's perfectly done. But if you remember how brown everything was when I first pulled it out of the oven and put water on top of it, you can see the skin parts have no color left in them at all. All of that color has been absorbed back into the stock. All right, most of the solids have been removed, but there are still some pieces floating in my soup. So I'm actually going to take a measuring cup and another bowl and a smaller strainer and strain out the rest of the pieces that are in this stock. Now, if you don't have a small strainer like this, one of the things that you can do is, if you have great patience, you can use a coffee liner in your bigger strainer, maybe just a basket filter. That would work okay. It requires some patience so that you don't overfill the filter and have the stock just run all over the place. Another thing that you can do is use a piece of cheesecloth. You may not have thought to have cheesecloth on hand, but maybe next time you're in the baking aisle of the grocery store and you are thinking about trying this stock recipe, pick up some cheesecloth. Then you can just line your strainer with a layer of the cloth, and it just absolutely catches all of the solids and lets all of the good clear broth just run right through. So here we go. Just going to do some scooping. It's still nice and hot, so I want to be careful. But you can see how much stuff actually gets caught in the bottom of the strainer. I would say I'm going to have 2.5 quarts of chicken stock out of this particular batch. That's pretty good. So when you figure that I paid, maybe $9 for each chicken, I got chicken pieces off of that. I got breasts, so out of those 2 chickens, 4 breasts per chicken. I think I cut them into 4 pieces each, so 8 breasts, and then all of the thighs and legs, plus the chicken stock. Now 1 quart of chicken stock like this is about $5 in the grocery store. So I'm going to have $2 quarts worth at least. So that's $10 saved right there off of those 2 chickens. So I maybe spent $20 on 2 chickens, but I've got meals probably for 4 people for the next 2 weeks, plus the chicken stock. So what to do with the chicken stock? You could, at this point, after you cool it and separate the fat from it, just put it in your fridge and just keep it in a quart jar or the larger mason jars. You could have, if you have a Tupperware container that holds a couple of quarts, you can do that too. It freezes really well. Just make sure it's chilled before you put it in your freezer. If you wanted to make chicken soup off of this, that would be perfect. Just bring it up to a boil, put in your vegetables that you like in chicken soup, get those cooked to the tenderness that you like, add some noodles or some rice at the end. I use chicken stock a lot when I'm making risotto. I use chicken stock when I'm cooking vegetables. It gives them just a little extra flavor. Anytime that I would just use plain water for something that actually is cooking another vegetable or starch product, I might use some chicken stock just to give it more flavor. Now, I certainly wouldn't boil noodles if I was just going to serve spaghetti. I wouldn't boil noodles in chicken stock. That would be wasteful. But if I was going to make a chicken-based gravy for my noodles, when they're finished, after they've been boiled in the water, drained, I might put them back in a little chicken stock and then just start reducing it down and get it good and thick. So that's a really good trick too. All right, well, that's how you break down a chicken. That's how you take your chicken parts and stretch them, make your dollar go further. And once you have exhausted every bit of goodness from your chicken bones in your stock, you are set with a pantry basic. Thanks for watching. I hope this has been fun for you, and I hope it's been informative. Bye-bye. All right, and here's a look at the finished product. You can see I definitely got 2 and just a little bit shy of a quart. So 2.5 quarts. You can see the fat already starting to rise to the surface. When those jars cool, I'll just peel the fat right off. Our Jewish friends would certainly keep that fat. It's called schmaltz, and it works wonders to fry things in. Adds a lot of flavor. Notice I didn't fill the jars all the way up to the top. If I were to freeze these, I want to make sure that there's some headroom in there, because when liquids freeze, they grow. So just keep that in mind as you're storing your stock. Don't fill it all the way to the top. Pick that schmaltz off, either throw it away or use it for extra goodness as you do your cooking. Thanks a lot. Have a great day.